It began as an ordinary day on the open waves, until everything changed. An orca, celebrated for its intelligence and grace, transformed the ocean into a scene of carnage. In a shocking turn of events, this apex predator claimed the lives of 14 surfers in mere minutes and consumed its prey. What triggered such extreme aggression? Join us as we unravel this unprecedented attack's chilling details and explore its reason. The storm rolled in from the Pacific with a fury that only nature could muster, its winds churning the waves into towering walls of water. Monterey Bay, a serene and often picturesque stretch of California coastline, now seemed transformed into a place of foreboding power. The gray clouds overhead mirrored the darkened mood of the ocean as if the waters themselves were mourning. Dr. Emily Hart, a marine biologist known for unyielding passion, stood on the rocky cliffs overlooking the bay. The wind tore at her hair, and the scent of salt and impending rain filled the air. She had spent years studying the pod of orcas that frequented this region, documenting their behaviors and fighting for their preservation. Yet the past few weeks had unsettled her deeply. The matriarch of the pod, a massive female Emily had named Calliope, was exhibiting behavior she'd never witnessed before. Calliope's calf had been struck by a boat propeller 2 weeks earlier, a tragic accident that left the young orca lifeless in the water. Emily had watched helplessly from her research vessel as Calliope nudged the calf's body for hours, her mournful cries echoing across the waves. Since then, the pod's movements had grown erratic. They ventured closer to shore than ever, their sleek black and white forms gliding through shallows they typically avoided. Emily's warnings had been stern but largely ignored. The approaching storm promised massive swells, and thrill-seeking surfers all over the region descended on Monterey Bay. Among them was a group of 14 friends, seasoned surfers who considered themselves invincible against the ocean's might. They laughed off Emily's cautions, eager to claim their piece of the storm's ferocity. The surfers, led by a brash man named Cole, entered the water just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. They paddled into the turbulent sea, their boards slicing through the frothing waves. The thrill of anticipation electrified them as they waited for the perfect wave, oblivious to the shadowy forms gathering beneath them. Calliope's grief had turned into something more primal: protectiveness, anger, and a sharpened instinct for survival. To her, the figures atop the water were an aberration, strangers in her territory. Their splashing movements resembled threats, stirring memories of the boat that had claimed her calf. The first strike was swift and silent. One of the surfers, Mia, riding a wave slightly apart from the group, suddenly disappeared beneath the water. There was no scream, only a sharp air displacement as her board flipped skyward. The others barely noticed, assuming she had been wiped out. But the ocean had claimed her, and she would not return. As the waves grew larger, the attacks became more coordinated. Calliope and her pod moved with calculated precision, herding the surfers like prey. When another surfer, Jordan, was dragged under, the group began to sense something was wrong. Panic spread among them, their once bold camaraderie fracturing into desperate fear. Cole, trying to rally the group, urged them to paddle closer together, but it was already too late. Calliope struck with a force born of maternal rage, breaching the surface and slamming into another surfer with her massive tail. The water turned chaotic, a blend of foam, thrashing limbs, and overturned boards. By the time the storm reached its peak, the ocean had claimed them all. The relentless waves battered the empty surfboards back to shore, where horrified onlookers gathered. Emily arrived moments later, her stomach sinking as she counted the boards. 14. Each one represented a life extinguished in the depths of the bay. The tragedy shook the town to its core. Search and rescue teams combed the waters tirelessly for days, yet no bodies were ever found. The loss of the surfers, once brimming with life and courage, served as a haunting reminder of humanity's fragility against the raw power of nature. News of the event spread rapidly, casting Monterey Bay as a place of breathtaking beauty shadowed by untamed peril. In the aftermath, the community was forced to confront the uncomfortable truths they had long avoided. The increasing presence of humans in the orca's habitat had come at a cost. Overfishing, pollution, and reckless boating practices have eroded the ecosystem's delicate balance. Calliope's calf was not the first to fall victim to human carelessness. and the tragedy of the surfers underscored the dire need for change. The beach was closed indefinitely, and barriers were erected along the shoreline to prevent future incursions into the Orca's territory. Signs warned visitors of the dangers and pleaded for respect for the marine life that called Monterey Bay home. Emily pushed herself into advocacy, pushing for stricter regulations on boating and fishing and creating a protected marine reserve. Her work garnered both praise and resistance. Some saw her efforts as essential, a necessary step to prevent further loss of life, both human and animal. Others accused her of overreaching, blaming the surfers themselves for their recklessness. But Emily refused to back down. To her, the deaths of the 14 surfers were not just a tragedy, but a turning point, a moment to reshape the town's relationship with the ocean. Months later, Calliope's pod remained near the bay, though their behavior had settled into a wary calm. Emily often watched them from the cliffs, her heart heavy yet hopeful. She knew the road ahead would be long, fraught with challenges and resistance, but she also saw the potential for change. The storm had left its scars but also awakened a new awareness, a fragile but vital hope for coexistence. The sun hung low over the rugged cliffs of the Australian coastline, casting a golden glow over the turquoise waters of a secluded bay. Olivia Hart, a 26-year-old adventurer known for her fearless spirit, had set out that morning with nothing but her camera, a snorkel, and an insatiable curiosity. Her social media was filled with images of her global explorations, volcanoes, rainforests, and pristine beaches. For her, this untouched bay was another jewel in her crown of daring escapades. The bay, sheltered by jagged rocks and accessible only by a narrow dirt path, was alluring and foreboding. Locals had long whispered warnings about its treacherous waters, citing sightings of large sharks. But Olivia, ever the optimist, had brushed aside the concerns. The tour operator she'd consulted had assured her the area was safe, despite murmurs among locals that the company was known for baiting sharks to draw thrill-seeking tourists. Olivia entered the water as the tide crept higher, her camera strapped securely around her wrist. She swam purposefully, capturing the underwater world's kaleidoscope of colors. The vibrant coral reefs, schools of shimmering fish, and the surreal silence of the deep. She felt alive and untouchable, and her smile reflected her wonder. Later that evening, Olivia's belongings washed ashore. Her backpack, weathered but intact, was found tangled in seaweed. Inside, investigators discovered her water-damaged camera. It would take days to salvage the memory card, but the images told a chilling story when they did. The initial photos were as expected, Olivia beaming against a backdrop of aquamarine water, her arm raised in a carefree wave. But as the sequence continued, shadows emerged in the water behind her, shapes that, upon closer inspection, revealed themselves to be sharks. In the final image, Olivia floated obliviously, her smile radiant as ever, while a dark fin sliced through the surface behind her. The timestamp suggested it was mere moments before the attack. The town was plunged into mourning. Olivia's disappearance struck a deep chord, not just because of her tragic end, but because it highlighted a bitter truth about the tourism industry that had flourished along the coast. Rumors about the tour operator had persisted for years. Locals had accused the company of chumming the waters, tossing fish parts into the sea to attract sharks for dramatic encounters. Such practices were illegal but notoriously difficult to prove. Now, with Olivia's death, those whispers turned into an outcry. Olivia's brother, Alex, arrived days after her disappearance. A stoic man in his early 30s, Alex carried the weight of his family's grief on his shoulders. Olivia had been more than his sister. She had been his anchor, compass, and greatest source of pride. Her adventurous spirit often worried him, but he admired her courage. Now, standing on the shore where she had last been seen, he felt an overwhelming mix of sorrow and anger. Determined to find answers, Alex began piecing together the events leading up to Olivia's disappearance. He learned that she had voiced concerns to the tour operator about the safety of the waters. A fellow traveler who had spoken to Olivia the night before recalled her mentioning the sharks, and her frustration at being dismissed when she raised the issue. The company, eager to downplay risks, had assured her that no dangerous predators had been spotted recently. It was a lie, Alex soon discovered. Reports of shark activity in the area had been filed just days before her visit, but the company still needed to inform their clients. The more Alex dug, the darker the picture became. Witnesses came forward anonymously, recounting how the company frequently baited sharks for staged encounters while downplaying the dangers to tourists. One former employee described a culture of recklessness driven by profit, where safety regulations were often ignored. Alex's determination hardened into resolve. This wasn't just an accident. It was a preventable tragedy. He shared his findings with local authorities and the evidence mounted. Forensic analysis of Olivia's camera revealed faint traces of fish oil on its exterior, a likely indication of chumming nearby. Testimonies from former employees and local fishermen painted a damning portrait of the expedition company. The company had gambled with lives in pursuit of profit, and Olivia had paid the ultimate price. The case gained national attention, sparking outrage across Australia and beyond. Environmentalists decried the unethical baiting practices, while tourism advocates called for stricter regulations. Investigations culminated in a court case, and the expedition company faced severe penalties. The company was fined heavily, its license revoked, and its reputation tarnished. For the first time in years, the local government began revising policies to enforce greater oversight of adventure tourism operators. But for Alex, these victories felt hollow. The reforms came too late to save Olivia. He spent weeks wandering the coastline, visiting the bay where she vanished, trying to reconcile her vibrant life with the grim reality of her death. The image of her smiling, oblivious to the predator behind her, haunted him. It was a snapshot of Olivia's essence, fearless, full of wonder, and tragically vulnerable. Over time, the bay became a symbol of loss and change. With new restrictions in place, thrill seekers no longer frequented the waters. Marine conservation efforts began to restore balance to the ecosystem, and the locals reclaimed the area, their connection to it no longer marred by reckless exploitation. Olivia's story became a rallying cry for responsible tourism. Her memory was immortalized in initiatives promoting safety and sustainability. Alex, however, remains a man changed by grief. He dedicated himself to advocating for stricter regulations in adventure tourism, channeling his pain into purpose. Yet there were moments, standing on the shore at dusk, feeling the salt spray against his face, when his loss was almost too much to bear. He thought of Olivia, her laughter echoing in his mind, and wondered if she would forgive him for not being there to protect her. The South African coastline shimmered under a sunlit sky as Nicole adjusted her dive mask, preparing to enter the azure depths below. She had spent years studying marine ecosystems, dedicating her life to preserving the fragile beauty of coral reefs. These underwater jungles thrived as homes to countless species, their colors and textures a testament to nature's artistry. This particular reef was her latest focus, a remote location teeming with life but poorly understood. Nicole's team remained on the boat as she slipped into the water. The calm surface gave no hint of the bustling activity beneath. Armed with her research kit and protected by a state-of-the-art dive suit, she descended into the world she cherished most. Schools of fish darted around her in dazzling flashes, and soft coral swayed with the gentle current. She moved methodically, documenting coral health and growth patterns, oblivious to the unseen tension building in the deep. Unbeknownst to her, Nicole's research zone overlapped with a seasonal shark feeding ground. Local currents brought nutrient-rich waters, drawing seals and other prey, and in their wake, predators. A great white shark, its sleek body a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, patrolled the area, sensing vibrations that suggested a meal. It was not malice but instinct that guided the predator's next move. Nicole felt the shift before she saw it, a faint, unfamiliar pulse in the water. She turned and her world exploded into chaos. Over 3 meters long, the shark surged toward her with terrifying speed, its jaws agape. She barely had time to raise her arms before the animal struck. The force was unimaginable, a bone-shaking impact that tore through her wetsuit and into her flesh. Pain erupted in her leg and torso as the shark's teeth found purchase, and blood clouded the water. Adrenaline flooded her system, narrowing her focus to survival. Her hands groped for her dive knife, and she lashed out in a desperate attempt to deter the predator. The shark, startled by her resistance, released and circled, momentarily confused. Nicole kicked upward with her uninjured leg, each movement a searing agony. The surface seemed impossibly far, but the instinct to live propelled her. The shark followed briefly, its curiosity waning as her frantic thrashing signaled she was no longer easy prey. When Nicole broke the surface, gasping for air, her team was already racing to pull her aboard. Blood streamed from deep lacerations along her thigh and abdomen, staining the deck as they worked to stabilize her. The following hours blurred, flashing lights, frantic voices, and the cold sterility of an operating room. Surgeons fought to save her mangled leg, piecing together what remained with rods, stitches, and grafts. She emerged from the ordeal alive but irreparably altered. The physical scars were only the beginning. Nicole's once strong body now bore the weight of pain and fragility. The leg that had carried her across beaches and dive boats was now a source of constant discomfort, encased in steel supports and marred by angry red scars. But the emotional toll cut deeper still. The ocean, once her sanctuary, had become a source of nightmares. Closing her eyes, she relived the attack, teeth flashing, the crushing pressure, and the cold certainty of nature's design. Shaken by the incident, her team hesitated to return to the reef. Though they supported Nicole's recovery, the unspoken truth lingered. Her presence in the shark's domain had put them all at risk. Public reaction was harsher. Headlines labeled her reckless, a thrill seeker who had ventured into predator territory without regard for safety. Online forums buzzed with criticism, some accusing her of endangering the shark by provoking the attack. Conservationists and policymakers debated her actions, and the scrutiny felt as piercing as the shark's bite. As weeks turned into months, Nicole wrestled with her guilt and despair. She knew the attack wasn't the shark's fault. It was acting on instinct, not malice. Yet her injuries were a stark reminder of the fragile line separating human curiosity from nature's raw power. The world she loved seemed to have turned against her, and rebuilding her career felt impossible amid the noise of controversy. But Nicole was no stranger to resilience. Her work had been a battle against apathy and ignorance, fighting to protect ecosystems on the brink of collapse. Now she turned that same determination inward. Rehabilitation was grueling, a slow, painful process of relearning how to walk, regaining strength, and confronting her fear of the ocean. Each step felt like an act of defiance against the odds stacked against her. During her recovery, Nicole found solace in research and writing. She delved into the history of human-shark interactions, seeking to understand the delicate balance of coexistence. Her findings were sobering. Fear and misunderstanding had driven humanity to vilify sharks, casting them as monsters rather than vital predators in marine ecosystems. She realized her attack, while horrifying, offered an opportunity to reshape the narrative. Nicole began sharing her story, not as a cautionary tale but as a testament to the importance of respecting nature. She spoke of the shark's role in maintaining healthy oceans. She emphasized that her survival was a gift, not a punishment, but a reminder of humanity's place within a vast interconnected world. Her scars symbolized her mission, visible proof of the risks inherent in studying wild places and the need for coexistence. Nicole challenged misconceptions about sharks through articles, interviews, and public talks. She partnered with conservation organizations, using her experience to advocate for better marine habitat protection and increased shark research funding. Slowly, the tide of public opinion began to shift. Once scorned, Nicole found supporters who recognized her courage and vision. When she finally returned to the ocean, it was with a renewed sense of purpose. Her team, inspired by her resilience, joined her at a new site far from the scene of the attack. Nicole's first dive was tentative, her heart pounding as she slipped below the surface. But as the familiar world of coral and fish enveloped her, she felt a spark of joy that had driven her all along. The ocean was no less dangerous than before, but also no less beautiful. Nicole's scars remained, both on her body and in her mind. They would never fully fade, but she had learned to live with them. More importantly, she had turned her trauma into a force for good, channeling her pain into a mission that transcended personal loss. She had faced the raw power of nature and emerged not defeated, but transformed. The sun shimmered off the turquoise waves, broken only by the rhythmic dip of paddles slicing through the water. A dozen kayaks floated along the serene expanse of the Florida Keys, their occupants laughing and soaking in the subtropical beauty. Among them were Brandon and Tyler, best friends since kindergarten, and their camaraderie was evident in the ease of their movements. Brandon's daring nature had always complemented Tyler's cautious demeanor, though it sometimes dragged the latter into situations he would have otherwise avoided. The day seemed perfect until a sudden gust of wind rocked Brandon's kayak. He shifted his weight, trying to steady himself, but the sleek vessel tipped. A splash interrupted the peaceful rhythm of the group as Brandon hit the water. Tyler, paddling close by, froze for a moment, startled by the suddenness of the accident. Brandon surfaced, laughing as he waved for help. The group had begun to gather around when it happened. The fin appeared first, a triangular blade slicing through the surface. Then, in a blur of motion, the water exploded around Brandon. The bull shark struck with terrifying speed, its mighty jaws clamping down on his leg. Brandon screamed, thrashing in the water, but his movements only seemed to excite the predator. Still seated in his kayak, Tyler gripped his paddle, unable to move. His breath came in shallow gasps as his mind raced, but his body refused to obey. The others screamed, some paddling frantically away, others shouting for help. But Tyler couldn't tear his eyes away from the scene before him. Brandon's struggles grew weaker as crimson bloomed in the water. His arm stretched toward Tyler, a silent plea. Tyler's paralysis deepened, his muscles locked in place by a fear he'd never known. Seconds stretched into an eternity, and then Brandon was gone, pulled beneath the waves in a final violent surge. The aftermath was a blur of panic and chaos. The group was escorted back to shore by local authorities, their shock palpable. Tyler avoided the gazes of the others, staring blankly at the horizon. The reality of what had happened pressed down on him like a weight he couldn't escape. Back on land, the news spread quickly. Brandon's family was devastated, their grief spilling into anger as they demanded answers. Tyler, the only witness closest to Brandon in his final moments, became the focal point of their ire. In the days that followed, Tyler found himself ostracized. Brandon's parents couldn't meet his eyes without their pain twisting into accusations. "Why didn't you do something?" was a question they didn't need to ask aloud. Brandon's friends, once a circle of support, now regarded Tyler with pity and disdain. He avoided school, unable to face the whispers and stares. Nights were the worst. The image of Brandon's outstretched hand haunted his dreams, his helplessness replaying over and over. The community, struggling to process the tragedy, turned to blame as a means of coping. Discussions about shark attacks dominated local conversations, with some calling for measures to cull the shark population, and others arguing for increased safety protocols. Tyler listened from the periphery, his guilt a constant gnawing presence. He began to research shark behavior obsessively, trying to make sense of the incident, though no amount of information could ease his torment. As weeks passed, Tyler realized he couldn't live in the shadow of that day forever. He decided to channel his guilt into something productive. He approached a local paddleboarding group with an idea for a memorial event in Brandon's honor. The plan was to raise awareness about shark safety and emphasize the importance of respecting the ocean. Tyler hoped it would bring some closure to the community and himself. The event took months to organize, but the response was overwhelming. On the day of the paddleboarding memorial, dozens of participants gathered at the beach. Brandon's family attended reluctantly, their grief still raw. Tyler stood at the water's edge, his board in hand, feeling a mix of apprehension and determination. He had planned every detail meticulously, but the thought of entering the ocean again filled him with dread. The group set out, their boards gliding over the calm water. Tyler led them, his movements steady despite the storm of emotions within. He focused on the horizon, refusing to let his fear consume him. The group paddled in silence. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves and the occasional call of seabirds. As they reached the midpoint of their route, Tyler felt a strange sense of peace. He wasn't sure if it was the catharsis of action or the presence of so many others sharing the moment, but for the first time since Brandon's death, he felt like he could breathe. Then a ripple in the water caught his attention. His heart raced as a familiar silhouette emerged, a shark circling beneath the group. Someone shouted, and panic rippled through the paddlers. Tyler froze, his muscles seizing as they had on that fateful day. Memories of Brandon's attack surged to the forefront of his mind, threatening to overwhelm him. But this time, something shifted. Tyler forced himself to focus, his breath coming in slow, deliberate gulps. He recalled everything he had learned about shark behavior. Sudden movements could provoke aggression, while calmness often discouraged further interest. Raising his paddle high, he signaled for the others to remain still. The shark circled once more, its movements slow and deliberate, before gliding away into the depths. The tension lingered, but the immediate danger had passed. Tyler's hands trembled as he resumed paddling, leading the group back to shore. When they arrived, the beach erupted in relief and applause. For Tyler, the experience had been transformative. He realized that fear would always be a part of him, but it didn't have to define him. The event successfully raised significant funds for marine conservation and shark safety education. Brandon's parents, though still grieving, approached Tyler afterward. They didn't speak, but their nods conveyed an unspoken acknowledgement of his effort. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a step. Tyler continued his advocacy in the following weeks, speaking at schools and community events about respecting the ocean's power. He still carried the weight of Brandon's loss, but it no longer paralyzed him. Instead, it became a driving force, shaping his actions and outlook. The ocean remained a place of beauty and danger, a realm that demanded both caution and reverence. Tyler's journey from fear to understanding reflected this balance. He would never forget Brandon, nor would he escape the memories of that terrible day. But he had found a way to move forward, honoring his friend's memory while striving to make the waters safer for others. The Gulf of Mexico shimmered under the early morning sun, its vastness both inviting and foreboding. The ocean stretched in every direction, a rolling expanse of blue under a sky so clear it seemed infinite. Boats dotted the horizon, each vying for dominance in the high-stakes deep-sea fishing tournament. The air buzzed with the sharp tang of salt and the collective tension of men and women chasing glory beneath the waves. Roy Harris stood at the stern of Real Pursuit, his weathered hands gripping the thick rod, his muscles taut as steel cables. A lifetime of fishing had etched deep lines into his tanned face, but the thrill of the chase kept him coming back year after year. This wasn't just a pastime for Roy, it was his life, his identity. And today, his instincts told him, was his day. The moment came with a violent jerk on the line. The reel screamed as the line unspooled, the rod bending nearly to the breaking point. Roy's teammates shouted, their voices lost in the roar of the engine and the crash of waves. Roy leaned back, planting his boots firmly on the deck as he fought to control the rod. His pulse thundered in his ears. This was no ordinary catch, it was massive. The fight was grueling. Minutes stretched into an hour as Roy battled the unseen giant below. Sweat poured down his face, his arms burned with the effort, but he refused to relent. Slowly, agonizingly, the fish emerged from the depths. It was a yellow-finned tuna, a titan among its kind, its iridescent body gleaming like liquid gold in the sunlight. Gasps erupted on deck. It was a prize catch that could win the tournament and cement Roy's reputation. But as the crew prepared the gaff to haul the tuna aboard, the water beneath the tuna exploded in a frenzy of movement. A sleek, dark shape sliced through the surface, a mako shark. Its torpedo-like body gleamed, and its jaws brutally closed around the tuna. The shark thrashed violently, spraying water and blood across the deck as it fought to claim its prize. Chaos erupted. The crew scrambled, shouting orders and attempting to salvage the catch. Roy, still gripping the rod, refused to let go. Adrenaline coursed through him as he braced against the shark's force. The deck became a slippery battlefield, coated in seawater and blood. The rod's line snapped under the strain, and Roy stumbled, his footing lost in the chaos. He fell overboard. The cold water shock hit him like a hammer, knocking the air from his lungs. Disoriented, he flailed, trying to find the surface. Above him, the sky was a distorted patch of light, the boat's hull a shadowed silhouette. He kicked upward, breaking the surface, gasping for air as he saw his teammates shouting, extending poles and throwing a life ring. But he barely had time to reach for it before he felt a sudden, powerful tug below. The shark had returned. The force was unimaginable. a primal pull that dragged him beneath the waves. Salt water filled his mouth and nose as he struggled, his body no match for the predator's strength. He clawed at the water, the world around him turning into a kaleidoscope of red and blue. The shark's grip was unrelenting, its thrashing unstoppable. Every second was a desperate fight for survival. But Roy's strength ebbed as the ocean claimed him. On the boat, his teammates watched in horror. They threw ropes, circled the area, and screamed his name, but Roy was gone. The water stilled, leaving only a crimson stain spreading like ink. The realization hit them like a physical blow. They had lost him. The gulf, so full of life and promise moments before, now felt like a vast and indifferent grave. News of the tragedy spread quickly. Roy's death shocked the fishing community, sending ripples far beyond the tournament. He wasn't just another angler. He was a local legend who had dedicated his life to the sea. Vigils were held, memorials planned, but grief soon gave way to anger. Questions began to surface, uncomfortable ones that couldn't be ignored. The Mako shark's attack wasn't random. Competitive fishing often involved chumming, dumping bait into the water to attract fish, which inevitably drew predators. Critics argued that tournaments like this disrupted the marine ecosystem, turning hunting grounds into chaotic feeding frenzies. Roy's death became a flashpoint, a grim testament to the consequences of exploiting nature for sport. Roy's family struggled under the weight of their loss. His wife, Linda, retreated into herself, her grief a private and impenetrable wall. His son, Alex, wrestled angrily, lashing out at the tournament organizers, industry, and sea. They found little solace in the platitudes offered by friends and strangers. What they wanted, what they needed, was accountability. The tournament organizers faced mounting scrutiny. Environmental groups called for a ban on chumming, while others demanded an end to deep-sea fishing competitions. Investigative reports highlighted the dangers posed by luring predators close to boats, not just for the participants, but for the sharks, who often injured or killed. The fishing industry was forced to confront its practices. Debates raged in town halls, news segments, and social media. Was the thrill of the catch worth the risk? How many human and marine lives had been sacrificed in the name of sport? Slowly, changes began to take shape. New regulations were proposed to limit chumming, and some tournaments adopted catch-and-release policies to minimize harm. For Linda and Alex, these changes were cold comfort. They visited the Gulf often, standing on its shores, staring out at the horizon where Roy had been lost. For them, the sea was no longer a source of wonder, but a vast, mysterious force, beautiful and cruel. Roy's story became a cautionary tale, one retold in the fishing community and beyond. His name was etched into plaques and memorials, but his true legacy lay in the conversations he had sparked. He became a symbol of humanity's precarious relationship with nature, a reminder of the risks we take when we step into a world not our own. The Gulf of Mexico remained unchanged, its waters as deep and mysterious as ever. Boats still ventured out, anglers cast their lines, and sharks prowled beneath the waves. But for those who knew Roy, the sea would always carry his memory, a man who lived for the thrill of the catch, whose life ended in its pursuit, and whose death forced a reckoning with the cost of such ambitions. Mia drifted in the warm embrace of the Pacific Ocean, the sunlight above fractured by the gentle sway of the waves. The waters off the Hawaiian coast were her stage, a vibrant blue expanse with tropical fish and coral gardens. Her heart thumped against her ribcage, not just from the exertion of diving, but from anticipation. This moment had been months in the making, researching tiger sharks, acquiring the permits, and hyping it up to her millions of followers. Today, Mia would capture the shot to solidify her audacious, fearless influencer status. At first, the tiger shark appeared as a shadow, a blur of motion just beyond her field of vision. Her pulse quickened as the creature glided closer, its movements impossibly smooth, its size dwarfing her. This was it. She steadied her breathing and adjusted the settings on her waterproof camera. The shark was magnificent, its striped body perfectly contrasting with the crystalline water. She inched closer, keeping her movements slow and deliberate, keenly aware of the balance between awe and danger. As she framed the shot, Mia extended her arm a little farther, angling to include herself and the shark in the same frame. Her mind, hyper-focused on composition and lighting, ignored the subtle changes in the animal's posture, a twitch of the tail, the slight lowering of its head. In its world, the shark was not a monster, but a creature assessing a potential threat. And Mia, uninvited, had entered its domain too boldly. Without warning, the shark turned. Its speed was breathtaking, its power undeniable. A flash of teeth grazed her outstretched arm, and pain exploded in her mind like a firework. Blood, a surreal bloom of crimson, clouded the water around her. Instinct took over. Kicking with all her might, she propelled herself backward, clutching her arm as the salt water burned in the fresh wounds. The shark swam away, its interest fleeting, leaving Mia to contend with the consequences of her hubris. Breaking the surface, she screamed silently into the horizon, adrenaline dulling the edges of her pain. She clambered onto the waiting boat, the crew springing into action, their faces pale as they wrapped her arm in makeshift bandages. The camera, still clutched in her other hand, had captured every agonizing second. The footage, uploaded hours later, ignited the internet like wildfire. Millions of views poured in, the comments a cacophony of praise, condemnation, and debate. Her followers marveled at her courage, labeling her a fearless adventurer. Detractors saw recklessness, a privileged influencer chasing fame at the expense of common sense. Conservationists entered the fray, decrying the encounter as a harmful perpetuation of myths surrounding sharks as mindless predators. Mia, confined to her apartment with her arm in a cast and her confidence shattered, spent her days scrolling through the storm she had unleashed. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale of modern hubris. Experts argued that such stunts endangered the people involved and the animals, which often bore the brunt of public backlash. Calls to ban provocative wildlife interactions gained momentum, spurred by her actions. Her once vibrant online persona faltered under the weight of criticism. The sponsorships dried up. Her inbox flooded with both adoration and vitriol. At night, she lay awake replaying the moment the shark turned, haunted not by the pain but by the realization that she had misread the situation entirely. She had thought herself brave, a bridge between humanity and the wild. But she had been careless. Weeks turned into months, and as her wounds healed, so did her perspective. She sifted through the backlash, searching for meaning amid the noise. Among the messages were those from marine biologists and conservationists who explained the shark's behavior, highlighting how her actions had likely provoked its defensive response. They spoke not with malice, but with an urgent desire to educate. Mia began to see her mistake as an opportunity. Tarnished though it was, she had a platform and a responsibility to use it wisely. She started by posting a candid video, not of dramatic underwater adventures, but of herself. Arm still in a sling, speaking without filters or pretense. She admitted her fault, detailing what she had learned about shark behavior and the importance of respecting wildlife. From there, she transformed her content. Once dominated by daring exploits and glossy perfection, her feed became a space for education. She collaborated with marine scientists to share facts about ocean ecosystems, debunk myths about sharks, and promote sustainable tourism practices. She highlighted conservation efforts, directing her followers to organizations protecting marine life. The shift was challenging. Some followers abandoned her, uninterested in content that didn't promise thrills. Others accused her of performative activism, questioning the sincerity of her transformation. But for every critic, someone thanked her for illuminating issues they hadn't considered. Slowly, her community began to regrow, this time rooted in substance rather than spectacle. Mia returned to the water months later, not as a thrill seeker but as a student. She joined a team of researchers tagging sharks to monitor their migration patterns. It was humbling work, far removed from the glamorous image she had once curated. But it felt meaningful in a way she hadn't anticipated. The incident that had nearly cost her so much became a turning point. She spoke at schools, sharing her story not as a tale of heroism, but as a lesson in humility and respect for the natural world. Her content inspired discussions about the ethics of wildlife interactions and the responsibilities of those with influence. Mia's journey was far from smooth, but was one of growth. The shark that had bitten her was neither a monster nor she. Both were creatures of instinct, navigating a world where boundaries had been blurred. Through her experience, she understood that the vast and untamed ocean was not a backdrop for human exploits, but a realm deserving reverence. Her story, once sensationalized, became a testament to change. It showed that public or painful mistakes could lead to deeper understanding and meaningful action. Mia learned to see herself not as the show's star, but as a part of a greater whole. When she floated in the water, the sun warming her back in quiet moments, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. She had found her place, not as an influencer chasing the perfect shot, but as a voice for the ocean and its inhabitants.